President Trump waiting a full 48 hours before condemning neo-Nazis and white supremacists for the deadly violence on Saturday in Charlottesville, Virginia. I want to bring in now Joseph Pinion. He's the outreach chair for the New York State Young Republicans. CNN political commentators Nina Turner and Van Jones, and syndicated talk radio host John Fredericks, former co-chair for the Trump campaign in Virginia. Good evening to all of you. Let's have an honest and great conversation. I'm so happy that all of you are on this evening. The president's apprehension, Van Jones, to finally call out white supremacists and neo-Nazis by name have a lot of us questioning his motives and, frankly, whether or not he is racist. Some people are asking, why did it take the president so long to say what any decent person would say about these vile groups in half a second?
Well, he has some deep conflict, and I don't know if it's a moral conflict, and he maybe agrees with these people. If it's a political conflict, he feels like he has to, this part of his base, he wants their support. He doesn't want to let them down. There's some deep conflict in him about this that is not present when he's going after you, Don, or anybody else. And so it's worrying. But I think the one thing that I want to say very clearly, and I don't think we've said this enough, he is the father of a Jewish daughter. His daughter is Jewish. His son-in-law is Jewish. And the level of anti-Jewish vile and just the bile and the venom that you heard on the streets out there was as bad as the anti-black stuff, and in some ways, and sometimes even worse. Even worse. To not even, and now he supposedly, Donald Trump, he doesn't care about anybody else, but he loves his family, and he loves his family, he loves his daughter above everybody else, and his daughter's faith was being insulted, and he couldn't even stick up for his own child. There is something deeply wrong here with this president when it comes to anti-Jewish, anti-black bigotry, and I don't understand it.
Yeah. John, some of the president's supporters believe that the president's many-side speech on Saturday was enough, though many Republicans did not. A lot of Republicans spoke out and denounced the president's comments. But when white supremacists use the president's ambiguity as vindication, I mean, isn't that a problem?
Yes. Don, look, while many of us appreciated the president's statements today, it was a day late, it was $1 short, and it was woefully inadequate. What this president has to do, what President Trump has to do, is he has to unequivocally, totally excommunicate these people from the party, his movement, things he believes in. He should say, I don't want you. I don't want your votes at all. He needs to have a President Clinton, a Bill Clinton sister soldier moment. He's not had that. If you go back to the early 60s, where the conservative movement was first gaining steam, Barry Goldwater and Bill Buckley made a strategic decision to completely excommunicate the John Birch Society because they thought they were nuts and they were conspiracy theorists and that they would tarnish the conservative movement in the country. They got together, they did that. You've not heard of the John Birch Society since. Yeah. What President Trump has to do is tell these people they have no place. Look, these are domestic terrorists, Don. Yeah. We're not talking about removing statues. They were walking around the streets of Charlottesville with SWAT stickers, with riot gear.
Yeah, and listen, I have to remind people, and you're saying this, a day late and $1 short.
This is domestic violence, Don. You got to call it out for what it is, and you have to say these people have no place in this movement.
John, and I appreciate your honesty, and I just want to, and the only reason I stopped you there is because just for the sake of time, and I want to get other people, and I have to remind people that you were the co-chair of his Virginia campaign. And which is, and you have been a staunch Trump supporter, but on this one, you say he's a day late and $1 short. So I appreciate you being honest. But Nina, I think he had you until the sister soldier moment. I don't want to.
Oh yeah,
I don't want to get sidetracked and talk about all of that. But what are your thoughts? Because I know you want to get in.
Yeah, no, you read me right on the Sister Soldier, but we'll say that for another show because there's absolutely no comparison to Sister Soldier and President Clinton and what's going on in this country right now. I do applaud you, Don, for going back down memory lane because it's very easy for us, and people should have righteous indignation about what happened.
By the way, Nina, thank you for saying that. And I just, because you know how people are reacting on social media. The only reason it was that short, and if you feel like I glossed over slavery or whatever, it's only for time purposes. I was trying to show people, take people, give people a short history lesson. You can't do it all with even in a matter of 2 hours on the show. So I'm sorry for cutting you off. No, you can't imagine. Yeah.
No, and listen, maybe we do a whole series, but it is important to know from whence we came, as James Baldwin once said, so that we'll know where we have to go. Mm-hmm. Listen, what happened in Virginia is despicable, and despicable in every single way, and every American of good consciousness should understand this. You know, lynching took place in this country, you know, in the late 1800s all the way to the late 1960s. So this is not a lifetime ago. You know, I can hear Nina Simone singing Mississippi Goddamn right now, and I can hear her also singing Strange Fruit right now. People need to understand that there's real flesh and blood, there's real trauma behind what happened in Charlottesville, in Virginia, for African American folks, for our Jewish sisters and brothers, and that we cannot tolerate it. And we need the president, not just in his words today, because his words today were better than he said 48 hours ago, but he still has a real opportunity to push policy. You know, Don, he took an oath to protect this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Yeah. And domestic terrorism, white supremacy is real. It is painful. It is in the consciousness and the DNA of this country, and we collectively have to do something about it, starting with the President of the United States of America.
So, Joseph, you have been sitting here very patiently as a Republican, a young Republican. What message is the president sending to the country on race when it takes the president multiple attempts to speak out against neo-Nazis and white supremacists, and he still doesn't get it right? He bragged about the economy first. He took a black CEO on Twitter this morning. What kind of message does that send?
I think realistically, when you listen to the president, I think I told one of your producers earlier that someone who habitually speaks in the language of overspeak, someone who is chronically exaggerating in his language. And so I think, again, when you contrast that with the type of comments that were made on this past weekend, and saying, why is it that this president, who is rarely circumspect, all of a sudden, when it comes to issues pertaining to people of color in this country, suddenly cannot articulate a coherent statement that condemns evil by its name? I think that, again, when you find yourself, you know, with an issue where, you know, Senator Orrin Hatch and Elizabeth Warren are in lockstep, and you are not with them, you're probably on the wrong side of history. And so I think it's unfortunate that we find ourselves in this situation where something as clear as an individual who drove hundreds and thousands of miles to maim and kill people in the name of an ideology that 400,000 Americans died trying to condemn, to push out. I think that's a difficult thing.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but as a conservative, you support the president.
I support, you know, I'm not going to sit here and give a soliloquy on, you know, tax reform, you know, when we're talking about people who are died, when we're talking about a shared nation's grief. So I think, again, that we have to understand there is a difference in this nation between, you know, having a sense of accountability, having a sense of purpose, and also being able to, you know, say when people are wrong.
Okay. But my question is for Republicans is, when is enough enough? Is this a bridge too far for you?
Well, I think, again, there's the bridge too far on the issue of race, I think, was passed a long time ago. I think for many people of color, whether you're a conservative or not, that issue came with, you know, the Central Park Five. I think that issue came when, you know, for myself, you know, listening to a president, you know, on a victory tour, talking about, you know, thanking the many, many black people that voted for him, and even more so the black people who stayed home and didn't vote. You know, and I say that as someone who, you know, I'm Joseph Pinion III. You know, my father was born in this country, his father was born in this country, and his father before him was born in this country. And I'm the first person born with all my rights in this nation. You know, I'm not a 50-year-old, I'm not a 40-year-old, I'm a early 30 millennial.
And the birtherism too?
You know, and the birtherism. These are all things that are inherent in Donald Trump. The reality is, you know, we have that saying, right, I didn't vote for him, but he's my president, I hope he does a good job. And I think that on both sides of the issue, we've lost sight of what that statement is truly supposed to mean, that we are supposed to hold that president accountable, but also inherent in that promise is an understanding that that person is going to work to represent the interest of all people and at least try to make an entire nation, an entire tapestry feel as if they are embraced.
Van Jones? What do you have to say?
Well, first of all, I just think that the comments that were just made by our young Republican were just extraordinary. I almost just wish that we could just have a moment. That's real leadership. There's a moral clarity that we just heard that's sophisticated, it's nuanced. Hey, listen, there is a time to talk about tax policy. That's probably not today. I think that frankly, this is bringing out a lot of good in people. You know, often when there's tragedies like this, whether it's 9/11 or Fort Hood or something like this, there's a mixed response, and then suddenly all this good comes out. And I think a Republican Party that can begin to return to its roots of being honest and being, frankly, nuanced, sophisticated, smart about things sometimes, and get away from this nonsense would be good for the country. As a Democrat, I want Democrats to be better. I want the Republicans to be better so we can all get better. We've been in a race to the bottom because of President Trump's attitude, and I'm beginning to see people break away from it. You don't have to denounce the president, but to be able to speak the way we just heard, that there are things that are just too sacred to play around with. That is a healthy response to a horrible tragedy, and I'm just glad to be on the show tonight.
So I have a question. So today, I said at the beginning of the show, you can put everybody back up. Thank you. So today, I've been all weekend just depressed about this, and I needed to clear my head, and I went for a run today, Van and guys here, and I listened to one of Dr. King's speeches, or as many as I could on my run. And there was the one where he said, "Don't let anyone steal your manhood," right? And my question was, when is the Republican Party going to get its manhood back? Has Donald Trump stolen the Republican Party's manhood? Is this the party of Trump now? Has the Republican Party gotten away from its core values? And that's the reason why I asked Mr. Pinion, when is enough enough? And I'm going to ask John Fredericks on the other side of the break, when is enough enough as well? And we're also going to talk about the people around the president, like his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, like Stephen Miller, like others who may be advising this president to say something like, on many sides. Protests outside of Trump Tower in New York. We'll be right back. So back now with my panel, and before the break, John Fredericks, this is for you. And I said, you know, when is enough enough? And when I said, don't let anyone steal your manhood, and by that I meant humanity. When is enough enough? What is the breaking point for all these histrionics with this president, for the Republican Party?
Well, it's not here, Don. It's not because of this issue. And the other thing I'm going to say is this is now the party of Donald Trump, and he leads a movement, and that movement is based on jobs, economic equality, and getting out of these wars. But for the president, as the leader of a movement and the transformation of the Republican Party in America, words matter. And this is what this White House has got to grasp. This just isn't about poll numbers or saying something or who got what vote on one end. This president is leading a movement in America that is not going away. Now, what happened this weekend, despicable, and the president needs to completely disassociate from these people. Look, you got to draw a line down in the sand. And the line in the sand is human decency. And if they're concerned about 10,000 people in America that might not back their candidacy, you got to be kidding me.
There's a big problem.
Throw these people out, get them out of there now, and you can't wait another day. Another moment can go by, Don.
Are you okay with what Trump is doing to the party and how he's dealing with these issues?
I think when you talk about the issue of race, particularly, there is no question that this is not necessarily acceptable of what I think many people of my generation expect of the Republican Party. You know, I think many people who are older than me talk about, oh, we're the party of Lincoln, you know, kind of to the word blue in the face. You know, and it's often remarked, you know, as my grandfather always told me that, you know, the power of your legacy, you know, depends on the work that you do in the present. You know, and so we're at this crossroads right now where it's important for us to be able to articulate the fact that these individuals do not speak for us, that these individuals are not, you know, do not.
What about this president?
With regards to?
You said these individuals do not speak for us.
Well, I think, again, the reality is Donald Trump is the president. I think that, again, we do ourselves a disservice when we sit here and act as if somehow he is not our president, you know, or individual.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, not you.
That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But I want you to understand the question. But when is it, what is the breaking point? Because someone can hand me $1 million. But if they don't give opportunities, or if they don't think that the people I love should even deserve to be married or should have the same rights as anybody else or whatever, I don't want the $1 million. I don't want the small amount of tax cut or I don't want whatever other rhetoric I don't want a wall if you don't love my daughter, if you don't love my mother, if you don't love the people I love, if you don't think that they should exist.
Correct.
So then what is it? Money is money. Money is money. It's not human.
I think the reality is that for some people, there will be no wall. I think that that's the reality of America, and I think that's the danger of us, forgetting history and looking at the issue of race through a partisan prism. I think that often we can look at the history, the totality of history, and say that there is a revolving door between both parties, and racism goes where it can find the most oxygen. And the reality is that right now, unfortunately, that oxygen is found on the right. And we have to do a much better job, and that means that starts with the president, but ultimately it also begins with people like myself, people in the party, people that I work with every day, saying that, you know what, we are going to demand more of this president.
Van, I want to talk about Steve Bannon, but do you understand the gist of my question is, how do I tell my nephew or explain to my niece that, well, it's okay that someone can grab your they can grab your genitals, but I'm going to get, I'm going to get some, I'm going to make more money because I'm going to get lower taxes. That's what he promised. Or I'm going to get a wall to stop immigrants, but it's okay. You can grab your, genitals. Or how do you reconcile that? I don't understand that.
Well, I think there's a moral challenge now, and I think actually both political parties are being forced to look in the mirror. I think both parties have drawn our circles too small. I think it's obvious on the right that under Trump's leadership, it is true. There are a lot of parts of his program. If you didn't look at who was saying it, it sounds like Bernie Sanders. He is talking about making America strong and jobs and all the things that were just mentioned. But he mixes it in with a lot of toxic crap against Muslims, against transgender people, against Mexicans, against all kinds of people.
Against
and
women.
so against women. So what happens is that circle winds up being too small. That's why 3 million more people voted against him than voted for him. At the same time, the Democrats can sometimes draw our circle too small and not understand that there's some real pain in some of these red states and red counties and red cities with the opioid epidemic and the joblessness, and we haven't spoken to that as powerfully as we should have. Yeah. And so both parties got caught drawing the circles too small. And so now the challenge is, do Democrats just sit back and talk about how much Trump is terrible, or do we actually draw our circle bigger and catch some of the folks who are falling through the cracks?
You're talking about a political perspective. I'm talking about a human. And listen, I'm not going after you, okay? So don't think that. But one is a moral example, right? Moral clarity. And the other one is, well, maybe politically our tent wasn't big enough. I understand that. But morally, I'm saying, for the person who doesn't.
Look, on that one, brother, let me tell you, you cannot justify
any of it. The racism, the homophobia, the bigotry,
there's
the
no amount of money. Right. Look, there's no amount of money that anybody can offer me, you, or anybody to say, here, take this money now. Watch me brutalize this person. Take this money and watch me hurt this person. Right. And yet, that's essentially what this process has allowed people to do. You can go and take your tax cut and vote for somebody to put up a wall or to chase somebody down the street because they have on a hijab. Yeah. And that is that's not a partisan question. That's an American and human question as well as partisan.
Right. Hey, so Nina, I'm sorry. Let me get you in. Because let's talk about the people around the president. The president's a big boy. He's a grown man. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats renewing calls to fire Steve Bannon. And then you have calls for Sebastian Gorka to go, for Stephen Miller to go. Is the company the president keeps in the White House a problem?
It is. I mean, the president's going to have to make a choice, either Steve Bannon or the American people. Steve Bannon or doing what's right. Steve Bannon should never have been there in the first place. Amen. My grandmother used to always say that you can put truth in the river 5 days after lie, but truth gone catch up. And the truth has caught up with the president. The truth has caught up with America, and this is a day of reckoning for us. This is a moment of reckoning for us. We always have these moments that remind us, generation after generation, that we're not quite there yet. I would argue that we need some type of truth and reconciliation to go on in this country in the same way that they did in South Africa. We have never really done that. And Don, that's why, again, I commend you for going back so that we can understand what is happening in the present. None of this stuff is disconnected from who we are, our DNA. And we always talk about this is not a country that stands for this. Oh, no, it is a country that stands for this because it was founded on racism and sexism. This country was. But the one thing that we can say about the United States of America is that we are a nation of progress. And so in the 21st century, what rubs us this way, what causes us to shake is that now we're at a moment where, oh my God, that progress, that forming of a more perfect union is being attacked right now. But we have the collective power to turn this thing around. It is bigger than the president, than this president. It is bigger than this president. This is about all of us, but he has an obligation as long as he is in that seat to defend this country from all of its enemies. And we're dealing with a very vile domestic enemy right now.
And we're all Americans right here sitting, and we want our country to be better. Thank you all.
Yes.
Appreciate it. When we come back, two eyewitnesses, a politician and his chief of staff to Saturday's assault. They'll tell us what they saw and what they think should happen next. Live pictures of Trump Tower protest because the president is there tonight in New York City.